Hey guys, what's going on? I know that there's a lot going on in the regulatory environment and also with Bitcoin. And so I thought that I would get Seth Steinman and Will Clemente to come together and have a conversation. What's going on the regulatory front? What are some of these cases that are making their way through the legal system? And why is Bitcoin performing so well given all that regulatory pressure? In this conversation, you get a behind the scenes look at what goes on in the Reflexivity research analyst calls and also what these guys are talking about on a day-to-day basis. We started the Reflexivity research business because I wanted to bring a bunch of young, smart, hardworking folks together and to create research that we could then package together and give it to family offices, Wall Street hedge funds, and many others. If you're interested in some of the things they talk about today, you can go to reflexivityresearch.com and you can subscribe there. Here's my conversation with Will Clemente and Seth Steinman.
All right, Seth. So there's been a lot of developments in the regulatory front. I think a good kind of first starting place would be walking us through everything that's taken place with Binance and CZ that recently came out over the last week. Could you kind of fill us in on high level, what's kind of the implications there in terms of the lawsuit against Binance and CZ, and how long do you think this will take to play out? And lastly, what are the kind of broad implications for the entire crypto space?
So last week, Binance had a lawsuit brought against them by the CFTC, claiming that, amongst many things, they had broken KYC and AML practices, as well as operating an unregistered futures exchange in the United States. The CFTC can't legally bring charges against Binance on a punitive sense, but they can issue fines and ban Binance from operating as an American exchange in the future. Both of those actions are what the CFTC is looking to take. In terms of high-level implications, while the SEC has been willing to go after some of the smaller members of the crypto ecosystem one by one, the CFTC has been known as a quote-unquote big game hunter in this space, seen with their lawsuit against Bitfinex in 2018. This lawsuit could be drawn out for months, potentially years. In the case of Bitfinex, it took over 2 years for a conclusion to be reached in that case. We saw today that over $1.5 billion has been taken out of Binance exchanges worldwide. That's certainly an implication to be following in the future.
What do you think will happen?
I think the CFTC has an incredibly compelling case against Binance. They were able to infiltrate text messages between certain levels of executive members in the organization, specifically detailing how Binance coaches quote-unquote VIP customers in the United States on how to use VPN to bypass American restrictions. The CFTC also brought up a very compelling case about Binance facilitating payments for Hamas, a very popular terrorist organization in the Middle East. CFTC has not lost a case against the crypto institution in the last 6 years. I would not be surprised if the same happens.
And Seth, while we've got this, kind of new case unfolding, at the same time we're kind of reaching finality for the Ripple case. Can you kind of walk us through what's the state of that case and potential speculation that may be wrapping up in the coming weeks or so? Do you have a kind of potential timeline around roughly when we might reach finality with that lawsuit as well?
Yeah, absolutely. So nobody can read the mind of the judge who's at the case, but there have been many rumors in traditional media and social media circles that we will be seeing an end to this case in the next coming days or weeks. John E. Deaton, who heads up crypto law, who had actually submitted an amicus curiae brief in the XRP case, came out and said that he believes a resolution will be seen in the next coming weeks. It should be noted that regardless of the outcome, it's set in stone that either side will likely appeal, which means that while a case in XRP's favor would be a net positive, the SEC is expected to repeal and make the process last even longer.
And how do you think through the potential implications of the resolution of this case for other crypto projects similar to Ripple that have a token associated with them?
The XRP case establishes a key part of case law for other cryptocurrency projects. It certainly weakens the SEC's conjectures about certain tokens listed on exchanges such as Coinbase as being securities. It just provides a framework for other cryptocurrency projects to mark their project and their initial coin offering, the composition of their team in comparison to Ripple. And if Ripple is meant as a commodity, then that will certainly impact.
Seth, what about Coinbase? Obviously, we've seen that one be a little bit newer. That's from the SEC, not the CFTC. What are you thinking there?
Absolutely. So last week, Coinbase was issued a Wells notice by the SEC, which signifies that a lawsuit is impending against their organization. This comes after over a year of investigation by the SEC. Coinbase, as opposed to Binance, released a very lengthy statement in response to the lawsuit, detailing their months-long work with the SEC and the regulatory agencies' stonewalling of their attempts to create a reasonable regulatory framework for an American exchange. I think that the Ripple case certainly looms large in this one. The SEC's Wells notice was very vague, but Coinbase believes that the SEC is planning on labeling the Coinbase wallet, Coinbase's staking service, and certain tokens listed on the exchange as securities. The SEC has found relative success in some of these cases and in some not.
And then Seth, obviously Coinbase is a centralized exchange, but now we have Ron DeSantis coming out with this anti-CBDC bill. It sounds like there's other people who are working on similar things. How do you evaluate government response, especially at the state level or from individual politicians to the idea of a CBDC?
Absolutely. Ron DeSantis recently introduced legislation in the Florida legislature attempting to block the usage of an American CBDC, or for that matter, any other globally sponsored CBDC within the state lines of Florida. The legality of this type of legislation is completely unknown, as would be the steps to be taken to implement such a law. We've seen at the congressional level, House Majority Whip Emmer introduced a bill of the same nature, and I would say the same questions remain. Is this necessarily legal? And the implementation of said law would be difficult. This is underneath the backdrop of continuing research and development of proprietary CBDC from the American government, which further muddies the waters in these senses.
And so given the backdrop of all this, Will, obviously with so much regulatory pressure, Bitcoin continues to skyrocket. I mean, it's at 70% kind of appreciation from the start of this year. How do you think about Bitcoin specifically and kind of its performance given all of the things that are happening on the regulatory front?
Yeah, as you mentioned, Bitcoin's been one of the best performing assets kind of year to date compared to the SPS, XPX, NASDAQ, gold, TLT. And so I think the kind of question is whether this bid that we've seen on Bitcoin is either, first of all, front running of kind of the shift in monetary policy that, we've seen some of these kind of intervention programs come in from the Fed and the Treasury to kind of backstop some of the banking turmoil that we've seen, or whether we're actually seeing Bitcoin's kind of time to shine as a potential safe haven asset. And so I think a couple of the potential ways you can kind of approach this is, first of all, looking at Bitcoin's correlation to things like gold versus the NASDAQ. And so, while Bitcoin's correlation to the NASDAQ is elevated at the moment, Bitcoin's correlation to gold is the highest that it's been in kind of recent memory, at least over the last 6 to 8 months. And then also when you look at Bitcoin's kind of behavior relative to the other crypto assets, kind of going down the list of kind of the risk spectrum, if this was just pure risk on behavior, you would likely see Ethereum outperforming Bitcoin and some of the fatter tail assets outperforming Ethereum as people go down that risk spectrum. And so when you look at, Ethereum's performance relative to BTC in a metric that we look at called ETH BTC, and also Bitcoin's market dominance, you can see that Bitcoin's really been leading the way and kind of separating itself in terms of performance from the rest of the pack in the crypto world. And so, kind of combining those things and also looking at the derivatives data, looking at things like the 3-month futures basis, funding rates, open interest, CVDs between spot and perpetuals, it does really appear that this has been kind of a spot-driven rally. And I think it has been quite remarkable that Bitcoin's been able to shake off all these kind of regulatory developments. And so, kind of looking at some of these things in terms of gauging of, whether this is just a potential kind of risk-on bid, looking at a couple of the different kind of risk barometers that we just mentioned, in my view, it does appear that this is potentially people viewing BTC for kind of the, permissionless, decentralized, properties that it holds that, have really shined amidst kind of the banking turmoil that's been taking place for the last few months.
I think that's a great way to look at it. Seth, do you have anything to add on the regulatory front?
I would say that there is certainly a groundswell of state-led legislation going on across the United States. Very successful lobbyist groups related to Bitcoin mining infrastructure have been able to push through very compelling legislation in states such as Mississippi and Montana. And we continue to see northeastern states buckle up their consumer protection laws against regulation. I think this will continue to force Washington's hand in creating a nationwide, clear regulatory framework for the asset class as a whole.
That makes sense to me. All right, guys, I appreciate it very much. I think this is a great way to understand what's going on the regulatory front, also understand why Bitcoin's performing so well, given that backdrop, and we'll do it again soon.
Thanks so much. And if everyone enjoyed what we talked about today, be sure to check out our recently released weekly analyst call from last week that we released on the YouTube channel that this is on as well.